Welcome to the Parkinson's Solutions Summit 2.0. I'm your host, Dr. Ken Charlin, and today's interview is with Dr. Cheng Ruan. And Dr. Ruan is located in the great state of Texas, where he runs the Texas Center for Lifestyle Medicine. This is actually our first time meeting, but I have been aware of his work for the last few years. He is really a true innovator, and I've known about his work primarily in how he uses coaches to educate patients, which is such a huge part of medicine, but it's often neglected in the rapid fire fee-for-service practice. Now, he's doing a lot more, some really interesting stuff. So stay tuned. This is going to be a wonderful interview. Dr. Cheng Ruan, thank you so much for being part of this summit.
Thank you so much for having me. This is definitely a big passion of mine to talk about this. So thank you for the opportunity.
My pleasure. I've been aware of the Texas Center for Lifestyle Medicine for a few years. A few years back, when Medicare introduced initially what they sort of called experimental codes or investigational codes, CPT codes, to be able to bill for coaching services. And our mutual friend, Sandy Scheinbaum, who has Functional Medicine Coaching Academy, she and I were talking about how we can best utilize these codes, and your work came up. I think I even watched a video that you had done. It was very inspiring. And so before we dive into some of the more specifics in your work with Parkinson's, I'd love to learn a little bit about the genesis of your clinic and really how it came into shape to be a truly unique experience to help folks affected by things like Parkinson's.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for using the word experience. That's my favorite word. So back in 2015, when I kind of dreamed up, this came to me in a dream. Where that's the very beginning of my integrative health training. Now, I've been kind of integrative minded for a long time. My mother's an acupuncturist and herbal specialist.
Hmm.
And so even going through medical school, that was like my foundation, right? So when I'm sick, my mom looks at what I actually ate 24 hours before and see what's going on. And so when I went through medical training, it was a bit disheartening
Hmm.
to understand, oh my gosh, like this is what we're doing, and everything is a prescription, and some things are kind of temporizing. And in the field of neurology, that's where I got my training. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like 99% diagnosis and 1% treatment. And maybe that 1% works. We don't know if it works,
Hmm.
right? And so that really bothered me so much that I started developing pill rolling tremors.
Hmm.
Um, I was asked, so I've had multiple concussions. I'm a big 270 pound, 6'3", big Asian guy playing football in Texas, right? So
Hmm.
lots of concussions, and I had some pretty bad ones. And even in my intern year, I started developing severe vertigo and nausea on a nightly basis, and went to see two people. First, I saw a cardiologist who said I have SVTs and Wolff Parkinson White. Great. And then
Hmm.
but I didn't have it before. And then I ultimately saw a neurologist said, yeah, you look like you have Parkinson's syndrome. I'm like, what the hell?
Hmm.
So, but well, I didn't tell anybody, and I just kind of marched through. And I was like, no, I'm not gonna quit medical school or quit residency for this. There's no way. Went down this entire path up until I went into private practice and start realizing that the current way that neurological systems are being treated in the conventional medicine approach, not only is it not providing answers, it's actually creating burnout on the neurologist side because they don't necessarily have a lot of these answers, right? A lot of it is let's test you and wait 6 months to see what happens. Let's test you and wait 6 months to see what happens. Give you medicine and wait 6 months, right? This is what I
Hmm.
call it a 6 month joke in neurology, right? And so what happens then is that gave birth to this idea that there are ways that we can improve. So fast forward a few years, no tremors. I did a lot of stuff for myself: food, nutrition, exercise, different therapies. Treated my sleep apnea, all sorts of different things that kind of went down, and I was fine. I actually didn't have any issues. And so ultimately, what happened is that we ended up in my private practice, having one of my senior partners, and he was kind of retiring, and I started adopting all these really geriatric patients. And I feel like a third of them actually had like this Parkinson's syndrome diagnosis, really bad gait and stuff like that, right? And there were just like a disconnect, right?
Hmm.
And I told people like this is my story, and I was able to power through it. And they're like, "Doc, I never heard of this before," you know. Uh, and so the idea for Texas Center for Lifestyle Medicine came was like, well, you know, what if we can create like Medicare programs that get people together and talk? That's all I want to do, get people together and talk. I'm not here to treat, I'm here to talk. And so we created these group visit programs in 2017. And then our first group was with the end of Alzheimer's protocol with Dr. Dale Bredesen. And then we had online and in-person groups as part of our Medicare programs. And then we had Parkinson's number 2 and the multiple sclerosis just kind of went on
Hmm.
after that. And we started realizing that when people are talking and then we bring in the family members, they understand, they naturally start to get a little better. All right. And their symptoms got a little better because now there's a tribe and they're not lonely and isolated, which turned into this massive project that I had with Medicare, trying to figure out Medicare systems and payment models. And I got really involved in politics and the White House and stuff like
Hmm.
that to analyze the current medical billing coding system, which now, you know, 8 years later, we're doing really great on these programs on the foundation of like health coaches and getting people together just to have a voice. So that's how it really.
Hmm.
Mm,
That's great. It almost, there's a movie I sometimes talk about that I love to recommend to folks, and it's called I Am. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's on Netflix. It's a kind of a documentary, and the director writer had suffered from a traumatic brain injury. He spent a year trying to get better, conventional alternative things. Eventually he did, and he's a major Hollywood director who had done some of the most well-known comedy films ever produced. So he had, you know, enough resources to do things. It was very altruistic. And he
yeah.
decided that what he wanted to do ultimately was make a documentary. He felt, I think, at that point in his life, when he started to write the script and pursue this documentary, very bitter about the world, very bitter about a lot of, you know, politics and you know, the environment or all the things that bother people these days. And he had enough resources to talk to some of the greatest thinkers of the 20th century. Um, and he sat down with them and he sort of said, what's wrong with the world and what can we do about it? Right. But in the journey of visiting, you know, Desmond Tutu, and he's in the film, and other people, and there's a very funny, the trailer itself is kind of tongue in cheek because, you know, these very uh, sort of you know, people who are living in their own thoughts and things like that, you know, they don't necessarily know this guy's movie. Says, you know, I'm like a really famous director, you know, my movie, it started Jim Carrey, and they'd say, I don't know who that is, you know. But anyway, it's funny in the trailer. But long story short, in the end, it, you know, the message might sound a little trite, but it was, you know, because you and I know that in lifestyle medicine, we focus on sleep, we focus on nutrition, we focus on movement, we do some mind body work and kind of get the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems balanced. But in the end, what they said is, you know, it's really about our connections with one another. It's really about connection in the end that allows us to thrive as individuals, that will allow us to thrive as a human race. You know, I'm a big Star Trek fan, so I believe one day there will be a federation of planets, right? And there will be, you know, we'll all be united, hopefully one day.
And I
But
feel like
anyway, I love that.
I feel like Elon's going to be the head of the federation or something.
So,
Yeah.
well, so this then took you into the world of neurology and
Yes.
Parkinson's disease.
Yes.
And you were telling me before we hit the record button that how you partner with neurologists in your community,
Yes.
University of Texas, et cetera, because too often neurologists are caught up in that, I only have so much time, and
Right.
can't tell you how many of our Parkinson patients do not know how to take their levodopa, didn't understand, no one told them, or even things as basic as the doctor just looked at me and told me I had Parkinson's.
Yeah.
And I said, there is actually some truth to that. I mean, but it feels disingenuous. It feels like the doctor didn't really connect, didn't really take the time. And what you've done is you've created a space for these individuals, it sounds like, so you can complement what the neurologist does and you can open up, I'm going to
Right.
use that word again, that whole experience for folks so they can truly take better charge of their health and their Parkinson's.
Right. So my journey is this, and I don't know if this sounds cold, whatever, but in my view, I actually serve the doctors more than I serve the patients. And so, physicians we're at the mercy, but we're taught, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of my practice right now is not taught by stuff I learned in medical school or residency, right? And so, I think that we have to be careful of like the outcome. So, a neurologist's outcome is to get diagnosis and treat of symptoms management. But people aren't looking for that right now, People are looking for, oh my God, how can I improve this? And what we're taught in school is that, well, there's nothing that we can do to improve it because we don't know there's anything that we can do to improve it, right? And so there's a conundrum here. And I think the conundrum is that if we're only looking at Parkinson's, for example, as something to improve, but not a deeper foundation of what really is going on, we're kind of missing the boat. So believe it or not, there was a really unexpected way that I actually entered the Parkinson's world as a practitioner is through dentists. Okay,
Hmm.
so we started working with dentists because we had a contract from the VA, and at that time, this early 2017, we had and they were giving us like PTSD, brain injury, Parkinson's as a lifestyle management program. And so, and it was for a very short while, and I realized that a lot of these people had really bad biomarkers, inflammatory biomarkers, like hsCRP, TNF alpha. And one of the first place I look if it's sky high is the teeth, right? And I'm like, man, they have
Hmm.
severe periodontal disease. And we started working with dentists, and as their periodontal disease got better, their neurocognitive symptoms got better.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
okay. Digging deep into the literature, well, yeah, there's actually a lot of literature on that, the association of gum disease. But on top of that, we started working with airway dentists that did devices and splits for sleep apnea, and I came across an interesting guy who's one of my best friends now, Dr. Felix Liao. He's a dentist, and he talks about how the epigenetic shaping of our skull, of our maxilla, mandible, over the years have been like getting smaller. And he wrote a book on that called Early Sirens. And one of the
Hmm.
things he talked about early sirens is neurodegenerative disease with the skull issue. So
Hmm.
I'm like, you know what? I was told that I had these obstructive airway issues and narrow maxilla, and so are my kids. I'm like, okay, now how do I prevent my kids from having it? So that took me down this road of looking at a neurological inputs of the teeth into the brain. All right,
Yeah.
through the maxillary branch of the trigeminal nerve, which moderates the vagus nerve. And that also took me down this path of this other diagnosis I'd never heard about in medical school called the restricted oral envelope of function, which they learned about in dental school, where there are people who have what we call mentalis strain, the dimpling into here when they close their mouth and this downward chin, and their heads being kind of pulled forward, right? And this forward head posture and how that really dramatically affects the autonomic nervous system. I'm like, hell, I had that too, right? And so
Wow.
and so what it turned out to be is as I entered sort of this world of like neurological chiropractics, and at first I just thought they were crazy, and then I paid attention, And the head and neck and jaw interplay in the world of neurology is not talked about because it was really not taught. But at the end of the day, these are the healthcare professionals who actually refer to us because I do quantitative EEG brain mapping for patients. We look at neurological functions. So they were sending patients to us for the brain mapping. I'm learning from them. And ultimately, we had a conference. We're like, let's just meet together on one day. It turned out to be 2 days and had a conference and
Mhm.
realized there's a lot more to Parkinsonism than we originally thought. And so it involved physical therapists, chiropractors, pharmacists also involved, dentists. And so right now, in my other organization, Physicians Transformation Institute, we're trying to like corral everyone together to look at other disease states. We got neurology down, we got Parkinson's and Alzheimer's down. We're looking at other disease states like autoimmune disease. And so this collaborative approach became sort of my passion because it is my story. I am the
Mm.
patient, you know, and I did go through it. I'm still going through it, right? So it's not really the end of the story for me. And so the collaborative approach just in medicine in general is not really valued because there's a secularization and siloing of different medical specialties, and everyone wants to stay in their lane. And there's nothing wrong with staying in the lane. But at the end of the day, someone's going to advocate for the patients. This is where I think health coaching actually comes in handy. The health coaches are the
Right.
main advocates for the patients. Yeah.
Yes. And I always say that when people use the term holistic, our patients very often, they may mean like, what supplements do I take? I'm looking for a
Yeah.
holistic approach rather than a drug. But I say, look, holistic really means whole. It comes from whole, or it shares the etymology with the word
Yes.
whole. It means seeing how things are connected, seeing how one thing influences another thing, and that we have to look at the whole picture and not just silo, as you said.
Hmm.
I was
Hmm.
just curious. So you've involved different professionals, dentists, physical therapists, et cetera. So do you arrange for consults, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we actually help navigate the patients, and on the healthcare professional side, we have education for them as well,
Mhm.
with continuing education. So we're kind of on both ends, right? And we help them kind of coordinate who to work with, when, why, and how. It is extraordinarily complex, but this is where health coaching comes in. The health coaches are almost like the case managers on the case, right?
Hmm.
And we have an entire advocacy program. I mean, I have one health coach. Her only job is outreach coordinator. She just outreaches to other practice. That's what she does full time, right? Because there's no one person that has the answer to all this, and they might have an answer for a brief period of time, but ultimately something else is going to come up. And so, but the big benefit of what I do is collaboration itself actually since 2017 within the medical insurance model is actually a scalable business model, meaning that doctors get paid to talk to each other now since 2017, but nobody knows
Hmm.
about it because no one bills for it, right? Because this is kind of, once again, billing is also siloed away, some educational platform that only billers know about. But that's what we did. We started seeing that 2017 is where practice started. It's also the year where I learned about the intercollaborative reimbursement. I'm like, oh my God, I can work with other doctors, have doctors talk to each other, and that is actually that's my time spent on that, and other people's time spent on that is reimbursed. And yes, that's what's required for neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's, right?
Absolutely. And for folks who may not be in the medical profession, historically, as third-party payment for services has evolved, a lot of what has happened is what is called fee for service. The doctor sees a patient,
Yeah.
assigns a diagnostic code, now called an ICD-10 code, and then what's called a CPT code. ICD is for the diagnosis itself. CPT is the procedure or the evaluation in the office. And that's typically how they get reimbursed. But what that does is it drives the practice, the facility, the hospital to see as many people as possible because, hey, the more
Mhm.
people you see, basically the more you get paid, unless you're doing big, expensive procedures like, heart transplants or whatever. But by and large, for those of us who use more intellectual energy in our practice, then maybe doing things with our hands like the surgeons, it becomes a high volume proposition, which is really a problem. It's a problem, of course, the patients are very well aware of how little time their provider spends with them, or a lot of times they go to a physician-led practice, but they don't even see the physician because frankly, it's less expensive to employ a nurse practitioner or PA. Then the other component of it is, well, can we do better? And this has led to the evolution of what is called a value-based system. And that's where the doctors are reimbursed more for getting better outcomes for their patients in the end. So with that being said, I'm curious, because to do more of that value-based practice, you have to track outcomes. You have to know what results you're getting with your patients compared to that traditional fee-for-service model. And I'm curious what tools you're utilizing to do that sort of thing.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much. So for the people listening to this who are not professionals, like one of the reasons why potentially Parkinson's summit even exists in the first place is because the medical system itself has some flaws in it. And I think this is really important to understand where the future of medicine really is. A value-based system, it's not quite mature yet, but it's getting there. Is based on the value that you can provide for somebody, but it's actually a financial tracking, the tracking lower number of ER visits and lower number of hospitalizations and et cetera over time. And so what happens then, it's paid based on the performance of how much we can save the country money, especially Medicare and government insurance contracts. And the more that we can save money as an outpatient, keep patients out of the hospital, doing a good job, then we're doing great. And so a value-based system is powerful, but it's like I said, it's not quite as mature yet. And we do have value-based contracts and fee-for-service contract. We have both. But it's where I see the evolution of medicine. So I kind of want to paint this picture, Dr. Charlene. When I was growing up, my grandfather is a physician, and he practiced on the first floor. I lived on the fourth floor, right? We had a big building with four generations of my family in it in China, the rural Southeast China, right? And I grew up, and there's just a line of people that are outside, and then connected to the practice is our downstairs kitchen, and there's people around eating while they're actually waiting for my grandpa, my grandma's cooking, but she's also using the Chinese herbs for the season, right? And so, and you have different people groups and talking, and that was how the community survived as a whole. And so, and fast forward to modern time, I kind of recreated that here at Texas Center for Lifestyle Medicine, where a lot of people in our value-based contracts and fee-for-service contract both come together and appear either on Zoom or online or in person here. There's Tai Chi, Qigong, mindfulness meditation. We're able to do all that stuff with the value-based system with insurance reimbursement. So it's almost like we made our own community center, if you will, right? It's kind of like the YMCA.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful.
Except it's physician-led, right? And so, this is where I think medicine is going really in the future. And this is the true holistic medicine. It's not just about like supplements or whatever it is, right? This is the true holistic medicine, is getting to the core of the community, because this is how medicine used to be practiced before the 1930s, like from millennia before, right? Is sort of the community-based system. So I do think that this shift, we already know that this shift is already saving Medicare tons of money, less hospitalizations. And for people with Parkinson's, this is great. Like people talk to each other, they know what it's like. Okay. They come in, everyone got the same gaits, got the same walk, right? It's okay. They come in. Some people are better than others. But at the end of the day, we value their human relationships and have them talk to each other. And do we talk about the diet? Yes. Do we talk about supplements? Yeah. Do we talk about movement? Yes. Do we talk about stressors in life? Absolutely. We go from there all the way to neurofeedback and all sorts of fancy things that we actually have in the organization as well. But it really starts by building this community. And I think that's the medicine that we're going to have to all go back to.
I've seen implementation of these value-based systems, and sometimes they're done in our local large hospital-based system where if you're plugged into that system, you get a tablet, and
Yeah.
the nurse practitioner calls you or connects with you, and are you taking your blood pressure medicine? Are you taking your cholesterol medicine? Or are you taking your levodopa? And whereas I understand the importance of drug compliance, and I say this over again that I'm not against medicine. It's just that if that's value based, if all we're doing is ensuring compliance, yes, we
Yeah.
are playing a statistical game that says if we get everyone who truly has high blood pressure on blood pressure medicine, we will reduce the number of strokes or heart attacks by X percentage. But it also means that a certain percentage will go on to have a heart attack, will go on to have a stroke. And I frequently have to remind my patients who are taking those long lists of drugs for metabolic syndrome that these drugs may be improving their odds, but they're certainly not preventing the likelihood of the event altogether. And then odds are they're more likely to have the event than not from a number needed to treat perspective. But that being
But
said,
the big
go
problem
ahead.
with Parkinson's though, like that's a big problem in Parkinson's
Yeah.
because people with Parkinson's and Parkinsonism, so Parkinson's disease and Parkinson's syndrome, people with
Right.
Parkinson tend to be over medicated on stuff. All right.
Yeah.
Is because their primary care doctor is like, oh, your blood pressure is this high. Well, a lot of people with Parkinson's have autonomic dysregulation. Sometimes their blood pressure is
Right.
high. At nighttime, their blood pressure
Right.
is low. So I would say over 80% of the time, we have to reduce or even stop some of the medicines because on their tilt table test, like their blood pressure dramatically drops when they're getting up, right? That's what we do to
Yes.
people with the Parkinson's. And it's so a lot of these medications are actually doing more harm than good, but unfortunately, doctors don't have the full capability of getting that data, but we do, right? And so when we get that data, we give it to our cardiologist, we give it to primary care, we give it to the neurologist, and you know what? We will work with them, all right? You'll work with them on the autonomic balance. This is where like breath work, Tai Chi, Qigong comes in, where the autonomic balance can be much better, right? When their gait could be really much better, opening up their chest, lowering the diaphragm, diaphragmatic breathing. So that's been a big game changer to reduce medicines. Another big issue with Parkinson's and medications is that if someone has Parkinson's and they have cardiovascular disorder, it's really hard to know what's not a side effect caused by their beta blocker or their statins and all these other medications, right? And so there's a fine line there of trying to like maneuver like what's causing by what. Okay.
Hmm.
And I would say that whenever we look at these systems, yes, we do get the data, but I will tell you that 9 times out of 10, we're discovering their side effects not in a one-on-one patient visit. We're discovering it as they're talking in the groups. And since
Hmm.
the doctors are moderating the groups, the health coaches and nurse practitioners that are moderating the groups, we're like, whoa, 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 time out. You're experiencing what now? Let's talk about that. Who else is
Yeah.
experiencing that? People like raising their hands.
Right.
Like, let's make a note of that and schedule a one-on-one, right? And this is what's brilliant about getting people in communities is that people are just thinking, oh, I just thought that was my Parkinson's, I was like, that's probably a medication side effect, but they're not talking to anybody about it.
Hmm.
So what happens is the pharmacist, all right, comes in, the pharmacist looks at the review, and the pharmacist is like, whoa, okay, well, here's now the pharmacists are way better at detecting side effects than the MDs are because that's what pharmacist's job is. They talk to the patients, they have the side effects, right? So when the pharmacists look at it, they're looking at it from their point of view. And especially with Parkinson's, they're like, yeah, this could be this side effect, right? And so from a systems perspective, we have to have that like collaboration and integration to understand the pharmacology, the physiology, and the psychology, right? So we could bring in all pieces of the triangle together for an experience. It's a patient
Hmm.
experience.
That's excellent. And I was certainly going to say that while we're not telling people to suddenly stop all their medicines,
Oh
that
yeah,
true value-based care comes when we integrate these other things and actually create wellness, not just compliance, but wellness
right.
for our patients. And then you've taken it a whole other step by utilizing artificial intelligence. Can you talk a bit about that?
Okay, so before I even started Texas Center for Lifestyle Medicine, I was already diving into the world of RPA, robotic processing automation. It's basically computer robots doing like meaningless tasks that humans hate to do, right?
Hmm.
At that time, I started a company which failed miserably. Learned a lot from that. At that time, I was this company that I started. We had engineers, and we were looking at processes and looking at the federal government database, how we can save Medicare money so we can get these contracts, right? Um, that was years ago. Fast forward to the creation of OpenAI and ChatGPT and all this fancy stuff. That process is now 1/1000th the price of what I tried to do
Hmm.
back in 2016 and 2017. And so what it is that here's the big problem, especially with neurology, is that patients come in with a ton of data, right? And now we do functional integrative health with medical insurance, so people literally will fly here because it's cheaper to see at local doctors, right? Because they can use
Hmm.
insurance. So we have tons of data, usually between 1 to 300 pages of data by the time someone comes in to here. The big deal is trying to assess all the data, and machines can honestly do it much better than us. So we have our own systems that look at this along with neural mapping and imaging data with AI also part of that, and the patient's story. We're now looking at the patient's speech. Has their speech pattern changed over time? The AI can detect that now too, right? So we have new performance indices for the patient, so we can look at on the micro scale, what's really going on, right?
Hmm.
And so the artificial intelligence is going to get a lot more complex in the next month when the AI can actually analyze video to see like walking, gait, airway structures, posture, stuff like that, right? There's a lot of companies that kind of working on this already anyways. So what we currently have is that we have the AI assess the patient's speech pattern, the doctor's speech pattern, the medical, like everyone. And it allows us to know where are our gaps. Are we making the patients feel that they're comfortable? Are they receiving it? Is there any resentment tone? Are people happy, right? And so we're just really getting started. But a lot of third-party companies have started this on a large scale for integration. This is beautiful for people with Parkinsonism because there's a lot of MRIs, DAT scan,
Yeah.
doctor's notes, right? And the caregivers are like suffering because it's so complicated. The caregivers like, what does this mean? You know?
Hmm.
And I can tell you right now, the caregivers are already putting things into Chat GPT, which is not secure. There's no security in OpenAI, right? And they're putting all this data into there to try to figure it out. And it's funny because I always know Chat GPT language because I see it in my inbox. I'm like, that's Chat GPT, right? And they're trying to make sense of it right now. But we're in this era where doctors can actually take advantage and store all the data, get AI analysis, and have it retrieve the data for doctors called retrieval augmentation. That's the tech term for it, or augmented retrieval. And then we're able to see this. So really good story. This happened on a Parkinson's patient who also had concussive injury and seizure disorder. All right.
Hmm.
So young guy, um, I'll say mid 30s or yeah, mid 30s, young guy. And he came in and he had 317 pages worth of notes. This is on my LinkedIn blog called Rebuilding Healthcare. I posted last year.
Hmm.
And so we had a local model that's on our servers, HIPAA compliant, of a large language model, which I built and open source. And it basically read, quote unquote, through the data. It took 15 seconds,
Hmm.
read it. And I had it prompt to analyze like really good data for me. So I know how to talk to the patient, who the doctors are, right? Who are the how do you contact the doctors in a database? And then it did something that's unexpected. And it says, Dr. Ron, there seems to be an error. And I'm like, what do you mean? Tell me more. And it analyzed that one of the reports, the original preliminary EEG says there's seizure-like disorder in this area, epileptic form discharges, right? In
Hmm.
this area. But the follow-up note for the neurologist contradicts that. Can you take a look at that? So I looked at it. I'm like, oh, that's true. And so after that, the patient was depressed because Parkinson's was getting worse. Cinemet, none of that stuff was really working. And then the primary care put him on an antidepressant, but the antidepressant lowers the seizure threshold, which means they're more likely to have seizures. So after that antidepressant was on, the patient was hospitalized 17 times in a year. And my AI pointed it out in the actual notes. And then I look like a hero going to with the patient, like, wow, I want to point this out real quick. So anyway, long story short, I called his neurologist. They're like, oh yeah, let's figure that process out. Stop the meds. He's doing fine now. He's had only a one seizure in the last, I don't know, like six,
Hmm.
7 months or something like that, right? And that's from him being dumb and drinking too hard.
No,
Right? And so, like, this is the stuff that, like, artificial intelligence can be really masterful at, and people don't have to fear it, like the way that people are fearing right now, but really augments and elevates the things that we do. And so, and like, you know what? And also, it's less costly. I'm spending a lot less time, right, looking at these things and being burnt out myself, right? We can augment our retrieval of information as data. In fact, AI is how we're teaching doctors right now on our modules, to learn about these things like neurology, to learn about business and education and Medicare and stuff like that, right? And so we're just really getting started with the AI. But if you're, for the people who are listening to this who are in our practice, you know, on my screen, this little timer in the top right, and it's the AI is actually listening and writing for us. And
hmm,
so, but that's really the wave of the future. So no one has to fear it.
that is wonderful. I'm afraid we are out of time for this fantastic interview, and I really look forward to reconnecting. But before we go, if people want to learn more about what you do, visit your practice, if you have anything online you'd like to offer or make people aware of, please, I'd love to hear more about it.
Yeah, so go to our website, which is Texas Center for Lifestyle Medicine, .org, not .com, .org organization. So that's the medical practice. If you're a healthcare professional listening to this, my nonprofit is Physician Transformation Institute. You can just Google that, you'll see it. And we actually raise funds for anonymous mental health services for healthcare professionals going through depression. That's our educational arm of the things that we do. And other business professionals, like, hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm on there quite a bit talking about things, and my newsletter is called Rebuilding Healthcare. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ruan. I look forward to reconnecting with you soon. And I know that folks listening or watching this interview have gotten a tremendous amount. And, you know, if nothing else, they're now thinking about the kind of healthcare they want to receive, which is so important that we not take for granted the current most common paradigm, that there are innovators like yourself who are changing the way that healthcare is created, truly created. We want to create healthcare and deliver it to our patients. So thank you so much.
Actually, I forgot something. Dr. Charlene, I did create a PDF. I totally forgot about it when you mentioned now. This PDF is for those of you who are diagnosed with both either Parkinson's or Alzheimer's disease, things you talk to your doctor about that may be medication side effects that you wouldn't have thought otherwise. All right. It's a nice, really good sheet to kind of work through with the most common medications and side effects. But it's a thing that people don't really think about. They just think, oh, it's my Parkinson's, but there are really common things out there. So we'll get that in the download.
For
Mhm.
sure. Folks, download that. It'll help you connect to Dr. Ruan. It'll really serve you incredibly well. Until next time, again, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.